Hey y'all, it's me, Naris. Now, I know I don't usually do live streams like this. Well, I mean, sometimes we have all types of conversations, and it's wonderful and it's great. Um, and the funny thing is, like, mind you, I was like dressed and everything earlier, but I still have my makeup on, so it's fine. Um, but um, usually I'm talking about like music but we have all types of conversations. We talk about spirituality, politics, and all these things. And from the live stream title, you can sense that this is about Harry Potter. Um, because I recently, I'm still in the process of binge watching Harry Potter, um, like the whole series, movies. Right? I started reading the books years ago when I was younger, and I hadn't finished it. And I kind of want to, just certain things in life has kind of like shown up and kind of been um just like a priority. But I remember like going through like reading through the books, and I think I got up to like the fifth one, um, which is Order of Phoenix. But anyway, so I was rewatching the movies, right? Which is something I was thinking about doing for the holidays. But then at the same time, there's Truman Show direction. Um, but that's another conversation for another time. But what's interesting, especially in like the first two movies, um, I know there's a switch in directors, so I'm sure that that has an effect. But even into the third movie, the person who directed the first two movies was a producer on the third movie. So, like, they were still involved before. I think they might not have been involved for the fourth one. But either way, so I'm watching Harry Potter, right? And it's interesting watching as an adult when you have your life experiences and different things occur, and you have a different perspective about certain things. Kind of like that thing that I've mentioned before, where, say, you have a certain experience and memory of a thing, like whether it's music or movies or whatever, when you're younger. And then after you've lived life and have experiences, that it shifts your perspectives about something. Whereas like the lyrics hit a little bit differently because you've actually like been heartbroken before. Um, Whereas when you were younger, you might have just liked the song because you liked the song, but then when you're older, you actually experience some things and it's like, oh wow, you relate to this art form a little bit more than you once had. Um, you know, when you initially heard it. And I feel like I've just been having that experience with art for a long time. Um, and specifically with the Harry Potter movies. Um, I had like binge watched it maybe like a few years ago. But now like I've watched it again with a completely different perspective now. And it's interesting because again of lived experiences and of course like it's a fantasy fictional movie world, but is it really though? you know I think we're in a day and age where people are more aware and accepting of spirituality and magic and conjure, which has been around for a very long time. And it might not be exact to like how it's portrayed in Harry Potter, but just like the essence of there being um a world of magic from even some simple stuff like if you think to the fourth film with Alistair Moody, who was the defense against the dark arts teacher for that year because every year they had a different teacher, which is crazy. But Alistair Moody, I'm pretty sure that name was in reference to Aleister Crowley, you know? And it's little stuff like that where like in watching as an adult, like knowing more about just different references and historical things in regards to um magic, conjure, and spirituality and whatnot, and seeing like real magical references in the films. I was just like, wow, this is very interesting. Um, but specifically, the first two films, because like it's your introduction to Harry. He's learning about the world of magic. He has grown up in this Muggle world, and he has all these like special occurrences that just be happening. And even people who are aware of magic, or maybe they're well studied, they might not necessarily have an explanation as to why he has these experiences and why he, you know, hears things and sees things and whatnot. Even from like, you know, the like him having the scar, the lightning bolt. And what's interesting is that growing up, I always thought that lightning bolt, I was like, that don't really look like no lightning bolt. That just looks like the letter N. But, you know, um, and and just certain things, certain moments where Harry would experience stuff. And mind you, he's constantly learning. He's constantly learning about this world of magic and how things operate. But even with him not knowing, he still has these experiences that are unexplainable to even the most experienced or knowledgeable wizards. And sometimes I feel that way in my like actual life. And it's interesting, I feel like as adults when you kind of like can see yourself in these films and these movies and these art forms. It's interesting. Um, you know, and so I'm gonna make this short and sweet. Because I could go on and have a tangent about certain specific stuff and thoughts and ideas. But one thing in particular, I was really thinking like, mind you, I grew up with these movies. You know what I mean? Like I was aware of the books and I didn't start reading the books until later, until after the fact, but I was a kid when these movies started coming out. And I remember growing up with the Harry Potter series, like anticipating when the new movie was coming out, going to the movie theaters, seeing the films, like it was really truly like a moment in time to experience Harry Potter, like the phenomenon of not only the books too, but specifically the movies in real time. You know what I mean? Like to be anticipating like, oh, the next movie's coming out. Oh, I can't wait to see it. That type of thing. Like the phenomenon that was Harry Potter, like in the 2000s was a moment because it's such a like well done story and crafted world that was just so intriguing and interesting. And just like there's so many details and elements to it from like Harry's backstory, the world of Muggles, and the magical world, Hogwarts, the the magic ministry, council people, Um, just the nuanced cultural things. Like it was its own culture, you know? And so like it's interesting to have experienced like the phenomenon of it all releasing as a consumer, as a spectator, as a fan, and then like to like revisit it as an adult almost 25 years later and have a like completely new experience of it, especially like I said in this day and age where it's more. I mean, it's still like people will still be speaking in code and it's a little bit hushed tones and whatnot, but there's more of an awareness and just a knowing of magic and of alternating energy, whether it be to manifest things, whether it's like affecting the weather, um, and speaking things into existence, like just having that knowledge and awareness, right? And then so going back and watching something that was created 25 years ago, almost 25 years ago, right? Because like think about it, the very first Harry Potter movie, the movie, not even getting to the books, but the movie, it came out 2001, right? if, if we want to do the math with this. But think about it. The movie came out 2001. That means there had to be the screenplay, the script written to transcribe the book into a script, casting. You got to get the all the different departments, costumes. I'm sure there's meetings about contracts and budgets and stuff like that. But you got to the costume designers, you got to build the set, um book who's directing the film and this and all of that, actually filming the movie, editing the movie, like all of that would have film with something like as extensive as Harry Potter takes time. Like that would have had to take, I'm assuming, I don't know, I mean I'll look into it to get the exact numbers and stuff like that, but that would have had to at least take like, I'm assuming like a year or two. And then editing, right? So like filming, editing, and then releasing the press run of marketing the movie, it being in theaters, box office, right? So the process of making Harry Potter prior to it being released in 2001, right, is something to keep in mind. And all the way up until today, where there's, you know, it's funny, even with the lack of representation as a Black woman, there's still ways that I see myself um, in something even as magical and whimsical as Harry Potter, which is interesting to say the least. Um, Especially like even in the very first scene, like the opening scene where you see old school Dumbledore coming out of the shadows, walking by this shed looking thing. And you got Professor McGonagall, but she's in cat form, like sitting in front of the shed, coming out of the shadows, and he's like taking like the lights out, the lamps in the driveway, or like in the neighborhood where you can see people's cars are parked, you know. Like, I mean, I know it's a long time, and since that movie's come out, if y'all haven't seen it, I suggest like having a moment, like, especially like if you're a hater of mine in any way, in any capacity, and you just need a moment of joy, I suggest you just sit down and just have a nice movie night and watch Harry Potter. The first one, like, started from the beginning, because let's be real, like, the movies get dark as it goes on, especially with the whole, like, return of, like, Voldemort and all those things. But at least the first 2 ones, well, specifically the first one, is more, like, upbeat and cheery in comparison to the later ones as they grow older and as real adult things really taking place that could be, like, you know, a bit traumatic. But of course it's a movie, so, like, but because the first one, like, they're still kids, like, they're children in these movies, and even though they, have these adventures and they end up saving the whole school and all these things, like, every year, they're still kids, and what I can appreciate about the first few ones, because like, it's the holiday season, right? And there's something about those movies where even though they're not holiday movies, there's, like, a holiday, like, aspect to it, and especially with like the hall where they eat and have the events and stuff like that. And and because they go through the school year, there's moments where you see them go through Halloween and then and then have Christmas time. And I feel like the score that John Williams did, aside from like the classic Harry Potter theme, like just the score throughout the film, there's a holiday, like, element to it, like, it feels like Christmas music in a way, and so for that reason, was like, "You know what? I think I wanna watch this during the holiday season," but then again, I don't know, that could've been a part of the script, um, if my life were anything like The Truman Show, but anyway, that's beside the point, um, but there's that holiday element of it, and I say that because it speaks to me as a viewer, as someone watching. It despite the challenges and the like, and the, you know, coming of age, hero's journey that Harry is on, there's still those elements where like there's laughter and there's moments of comedic relief between Harry and his friends. And it's those moments where it like feels like the holidays that and with the music and the scoring and everything in those first few films that I feel like um still bring it that element of joy and positivity before things get dark. And the last few films, I think there's like this post that I remember seeing online a while ago where it's like the difference in Harry Potter movies with the Warner Brothers logo, where like the first two movies it's the bright colors, and then like the last few films it's like when everything is all dark. Y'all know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, like, when you see those movies and you watch like the opening credits and you see like the Warner Brothers, like, I'm sure you could look it up on like Google and see like a post of comparing like the vibes. But yeah, those first two ones were like, whoa, very like nostalgic feeling, very reminiscent of like, and I think they did a great job balancing the hero's journey and like the adventures that they would be on as friends, like, and as young wizards, fighting the powers that be, but then also like still being kids and still having fun and still, you know, having their sense of innocence. I think that that was highlighted very well um for that time, you know, back in 2001. And then now, like, we grew up with them, you know what I mean? Like, we grew up with that cast. And, I mean, there was some character changes, like the change with Dumbledore, and, interestingly enough, I mean, it's understandable because it's not like his character and was, like, or the flashbacks version of his character was significant, but even like Tom Riddle, aka Voldemort. But when you would see like the flashbacks of him as a child, um, you know, the Tom Riddle that was in Chamber of Secrets isn't the same Tom Riddle that was in Half Blood Prince when they were doing like the flashbacks to when he was younger and really um you know trying to learn the spells and stuff like that, and really diving into like darker magic. But yeah, I mean, I was like just watching that movie and just like really amazed at how like movies that you grow up watching can like change into something completely different the older that you get and the more experiences that you have and the more that you can actually relate to some of the things that they deal with. And plus, like, you have a better understanding of what's going on in the film too, like your context, um um not context, like conceptually, like your comprehension of it all. Like even I mean, something that I would naturally do when I was younger would be like paying attention to the things in the background, like and just like noting the cinematography and just like, background extras, characters and stuff like that. I've always like noticed those things. Even if it was done like strategically and intentionally, I might not have peeped the strategy yet, but I always like would pay attention to those things. So it's interesting in hindsight, like even prior to knowing that there's like little symbolisms in those background things, that I was aware of that anyway. Like I was aware to even like make like notice those things. But I realized like the older that you get, you know, certain messages might not hit or you might not receive it when you initially see something or watch a movie or listen to an album or stuff like that because you haven't built the context to it yet. Like, so I know that in that aspect that also affects how you're able to receive those symbolisms and hidden messages and stuff like that. Like for example, like like um okay, towards the end of the first film, after I mean, the movies have been out for 20 years, so like spoiler alert. So, but if I ruin it for anybody, whatever. It is what it is. Like y'all had enough time to watch it. And if not, watch it again. But towards the end of the film, right, after Harry's kind of like defeated Professor Quirrell, who had, I think that's how you say his name, who had like Voldemort like on his head, like telling him what to do while, being in his mind, shit like that. Um, After, Harry's defeated that, right? And he's in like the um like nurse wing or whatever the case may be, and he's like on the bed. And mind you, like it's funny because like the bed frame in that scene was like, oh my gosh, that looks like the bed that I had, but whatever. Anyway, um, so I'm watching this scene, and like Harry wakes up and sees like all the cards and stuff that people left him. Um, and mind you, at that point, Ron would have been in like the health wing because they had played like wizard chess and Ron sacrificed himself so Harry could get ahead, right? Wow. Shout out to his crew. Friends like that. Um, but yeah, so anyway, he wakes up in the bed and then Dumbledore walks in, right? And just like how that scene is like filmed, I love so much because, in Harry Potter, the whole like, there's like little nuanced things that adds to the world of Harry Potter, like the pictures with moving images, right? Or how like the hallways when they get into their dorms, there's the hall with all the pictures, and there's like moving pictures and people in motion in those images, right? It's like the pictures coming to life. And I think that the graphics for that 25 years ago were done very well with the technology that was available at the time. And and you could see the progression of the technology, but it was still like those movies are still really done really well. They were done very well for what it was at that time in early 2000, 2001, might I add. So Dumbledore goes to see Harry, and he basically kind of like explains like what happened while Harry was kind of like recovering and stuff like that. And that scene is very interesting in itself. Um, but it's really cool because how Dumbledore is goes to sit with Harry on the edge of the bed. The pictures, there's like two pictures in the background, right? One on the left, one on the right. And then the one that's on the right is a nurse going to nurse somebody in the bed. So the nurse goes to sit down in the picture in the background as Dumbledore is going to sit on Harry's bed, and it's intentionally supposed to mirror what's happening, like the image is mirroring what's happening in real life, or something like that. And Dumbledore's like explaining everything that's going on. And he was like, naturally, you know, what happened with you and, Professor Quirrell. Um, sorry if I'm saying his name wrong. Um, it was supposed to be a secret, and naturally everybody knows. And he was just like, basically explaining like, and I think Harry was asking like how the because this is the Sorcerer's Stone or Philosopher's Stone, but in America is Sorcerer's Stone. And he was asking like, how did I get the stone? Because I looked in the mirror and then I got the stone, right? And then right when he was talking about looking in the mirror, Dumbledore kind of like quiets him, and he's like, yeah, see, what happened is the person who is looking for the stone but doesn't want to use it, it reveals itself, And that was a clever spell that I came up with. And that's why you ended up getting the stone um when met with Voldemort trying to like mentally control the professor into trying to get the stone from Harry. But just like how that scene was filmed with the images, with the picture frames in the background, was just like done so well. I was just like, yo, the cinematography, like, and it's so simple, and I'm sure like it might not be a lot with effects and stuff like that, but just to like see how that was done like 25 years ago was like really crazy. Um I mean, and there's just so many moments. The only like um bone that I have to pick with that film is that there wasn't enough black people in there for me. Um I mean, there's like two black people in the background and they get a line if that, you know. But I understand. I understand at the time, like, Harry is a white boy, and for this story to be palatable um and universal, usually it has to be like that. And plus like this was early 2000s, so I get it, like 2001. But I mean, you if you look closely, there's one little black girl with locks, with like short locks, and I think we only see her in the first movie. I mean, there's other, like, black characters throughout the series. Um, like, later on, there's, like, a black girl with braids and, but whatever. In the first film, there's, like, this one black girl with locks, and then there's another black kid. I forget his name, but he was in How to Get Away with Murder, um, that show that was, done by Shonda Rhimes. If y'all know who I'm talking about. He the black boy that's on that show. But he was in uh the Harry Potter series. And he's been in several of the Harry Potter movies. But I feel like those are the only two that you see, you know. Um and the one time if you look during the Quidditch match, I think it was like the first Quidditch match, the black girl was announcing like what was going on in the Quidditch match, right? The little black girl with the locks. And she's surrounded by all the white teachers and stuff like that. And it's so funny because it reminds me of back in the day when I was in school, when I was in Catholic school. And it's funny because um Professor McGonagall, I hope I'm saying these people's names right. She reminds me of like the nuns that I went to school with when I was in Catholic school. And it's funny because even back to that scene when Harry was in the nurse ward, and Dumbledore went to see him and the pictures were reflecting, the nurse in the image looks like, I mean, they look dressed like nuns, but they're not nuns, but they kind of look like nuns a little bit. And I was like, oh my gosh, this kind of looks like when I was going to school and I had to wear a uniform and all these things. Um, yeah, but that was interesting. But that was the one time when we really see this black girl with lines. Um, and then like the other black kid, it's like the two. And it's like, and we only got down to two black kids on here. All right, but but I get it. I understand. I would have liked to see more black folks in the mix, but I understand. But you know what? Speaking of black people in this film, there is this professor. There was a black woman, like a brown, dark skinned black woman, beautiful, fashionable, black wizard that we would see during the scenes in the hall when they would have like their meals and stuff like that. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's like the only movie I've seen that lady in. And I feel like we don't really know much about her. I looked her up and there's apparently like a Harry Potter Wikipedia and I'm like, see, this is the shit that I love. Like I love the fact that there's even a Wikipedia specifically to like get information of the world of Harry Potter is crazy. But it's interesting because you see usually like Professor McGonagall and Dumbledore are like two peas in a pod, like at the hip, you know. And what's interesting is that this black woman will kind of like be on the like other side of Dumbledore, and like they all have like their witch hats and stuff like that, and I'm just like, who is this black lady like serving face like brown skin, dark skin, black lady, beautiful. Like who is her? Who is she? Like what's her story? I would love to know. Like I want to know the backstory to this lady. You know, um, is she an ally? Is she not? Like I don't know. I would love to know. You know, and it's interesting because it reminds me of this time. Like it reminds me of my mom. The film I'm saying generally. I mean that lady kind of looks like her a little bit because she's like brown skin and beautiful. And so is my mom. And I've said several times in life that even though I didn't really grow up with my mom, uh, you know, I will only have like pictures to reference her. Um, and I just known this image of her being like this beautiful dark-skinned black woman, fashionable, and I just always wanted to be like that. But I bring up my mom because I remember when the movie first came out, right? I remember my mom telling me that she didn't want me watching the movie. She was like, "I don't like, don't watch Harry Potter." And mind you, it's funny because, like, again, I think, like, how old was I at the time? Like like 4 or 5 or something like that, like 5 years old, 5 or 6, give or take. And this was, I mean, forgive me, it's a long time ago. And, I think it was around the time where, like, things started getting, like, dicey between her and my father. Um, and it was, like, the start of her, like, not, like, being here in this house. And, and I just remember her saying, like, like, "Don't watch Harry Potter, this and that." And at first, I thought she said that because of, like, the magic and witchcraft, stuff like that, or whatever, and I get that how some, like, people say, like, "Oh, you know, I don't wanna I don't want my kids watching, like, it because it could be, like, demonic or, like, it's witchcraft or whatever." And that was always my perspective. And then also, again, like, something that I've said several times, like, that I remember, just a random memory that I remember at that time, was that, when she was teaching me back when she was living in the house, she was teaching me how to, like, read and write, um, a little bit, like, in between, like, school and stuff like that. And I remember us specifically doing this, like, writing thing around Martin Luther King Day. Um, and I remember being, like, ambidextrous and her telling me not to write with my left hand. And I was like, "Okay, all right." And so I'm right-handed, you know? But anyway, side note. But, yeah, and so, I'm just, like, looking at this movie, and I'm just like, "Yo, who is this beautiful black woman in the background? Why don't we see more of her? What's her story? What's her backstory? What's the truth of this lady?" Because I'm like, I know she's more than just like this beautiful black woman in the background. You know what I mean? And that's just me as a black person caring for representation in films. Um, and I'm just like, what's her story? You know? Because I mean, it's funny because you have somebody like Snape, right? Snape is just so fucking fabulous to me. I fucking love his character. And Alan Rickman, may he rest in peace. And like so many of the cast, like both people who played Dumbledore and Maggie Smith, who passed earlier this year, it's just fucking crazy. I didn't realize that. But Alan Rickman, who plays Snape, I love his character because he's so complex, and and he's like, he obviously has these aesthetics to be the villain, but he's just so fucking cool, man. Like, he's so cool. Like, it's just how he delivers his lines. Like, his approach with Snape is just like perfect. But I say this to say, like, he's such a complex character because, like, even though objectively you would see him as the villain, right? Like, he's got this dark aesthetic, the black hair, he's like stern, he like is no nonsense with the kids, right? But the complexity of him is that he actually cares. And and he's, as you watch the series go on, he's like caught between like being loyal to Dumbledore and his cause and Order of Phoenix versus like having a history with the Death Eaters. Because I mean, he fits the vibe and the aesthetics of the Death Eaters, but I mean, I like, spoiler alert, like, he really was like siding with Dumbledore and and wanting to fight to protect Harry. Like even in the first movie, like from that scene where in the Quidditch match, and there's a jinx on Harry's broom. You would think that is Snape because, Hermione looks across with her binoculars and sees that Snape is doing some type of spell. And you would think like, oh, Snape is trying to jinx his broom, but it was really the professor in the background that was like stuttering and all that, Professor Quirrell, or Quill, I think is how y'all know who I'm talking about. That man that had Voldemort on his head. It was actually him doing the spell on Harry, and Snape is actually trying to protect Harry. And it's interesting because, like, upon learning the history of Snape and his relationship with Harry's mom and father, and the fact that Harry's father used to bully Snape, and I think he either had a crush on his mom or was friends with her. I mean, I'm right now like catching up to like the Deathly Hollows. Um, and I know they go into detail in those movies, but I know that he was bullied by Harry's dad. And even though people talk about how great his parents were and all these things, like he has a history of like, yeah, I know you have this image of your parents, but I actually know your parents. And and Harry is just living his life just trying to catch up on like this whole magical world, but then also like getting the truth of his heritage and his family through all these other people, because he unfortunately didn't get to know the true versions of his parents, um or just he didn't even get to experience them really, but he just goes off of what he's told about them. And the interesting thing with Snape is that even with the history of being bullied by James Potter, and having the friendship with Lily, his mom, he still saw the importance of protecting Harry. Even when he would like be on Harry's neck, when he would be acting up and all this stuff, and him and Ron be talking in class and stuff like that. But when it really mattered, for the sake of like the battles and the fights and all of that stuff, and that was and the just the issues that was coming up in the school, when it really mattered, Snape would really care to like protect Harry. And it's interesting. And I love his character so much, just because like again, like I just feel like he's so sassy and like the coolest way. And it's just like the delivery of his lines. Um I just love his character. But it's interesting because a lot of the times where you could blame Snape or you could look at him as the bad guy, you see like he really was trying to fight for good. And just that complexity as a character is so intriguing. And I've seen and experienced that in my own existence. And it's like, like what's the true, and it makes me think back to that other professor, like that Blake lady. Um, I wish we had seen more of her story, because it was like, who is that lady? We only know what we see. We don't know who that character is. And we can only have assumptions based on like what information is available. I'm sure there's more in the books, but we don't know that lady. We don't know that lady. And there might be complexities to her storyline that we don't know, like someone like a Snape, or someone like a Alistair Moody, or even Sirius Black, like his introduction to the Harry Potter world in Prisoner of Azkaban is him being a fugitive, and him like on the run because he betrayed James and Lily, right? But we don't know the full story. We don't know the full scope of things, and he's being blamed for something that wasn't his fault. and had been jailed for it for years. And until you realize it was actually Peter Pettigrew that betrayed Lily and James because he lacked courage. But naturally, if you're watching as the viewer, or if you're Harry, somebody who didn't grow up with his parents or didn't grow up with these people and don't really know their backstory, he's just going off of what he's being told and what's being reported on the news and stuff like that. And it's like, oh, we don't trust Sirius Black, but he doesn't realize that actually Sirius Black was his godfather and really, you know, was loyal to his father and to his mom. Um, and even somebody like Lupin, I think Lupin was one of the better teachers that they had. It's unfortunate that he was a werewolf and, had to struggle with the whole, like, shifting to a werewolf and not being able to control himself or whatever the case may be. But out of all of them dark arts teachers, because they had a new one every year, which is crazy. I'm like, of all places where y'all shouldn't be having turnover is Hogwarts for the Defense Against the Dark Arts, because y'all be having a lot of dark arts shenanigans go on over there. But I do feel like Lupin was one of the better teachers, and he was one of the people that really took the time to teach Harry because he knew Harry's parents. He was friends with Harry's parents. And him teaching Harry how to do the Patronus, was a big deal because that was like, advanced magic. And him taking the time to really pour into Harry at that time was like, it was beautiful to see. And a lot of times you got people like Lockhart who was just there, for the storyline, looking good, but wasn't really about that life, could barely do any fucking spells. The only spell he knew how to do was fuck up people's memory and play with people's heads, you know, just so he could take credit for their work. But, you know, somehow, somewhere he got hired. And this is Chamber of Secrets, mind you. Who was the teacher in the first movie though? The first film was because they switched them out. Damn, who was the dark arts teacher in the first film? Oh man, it'll come to me. But I know it was Lockhart for Chamber of Secrets, Lupin, Prisoner of Azkaban, Order Phoenix was the lady from the what's the name? The Ministry lady, coming out there changing all the rules and shit. Which was like, okay, so that was another thing too. That was like a valid um situation just because like there was always something going down at Hogwarts, right? It was always some shenanigans, some type of adversity, like trials and tribulations at Hogwarts. And it's like, damn, the fuck do y'all be doing here every year? And every year y'all need a new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher? Crazy. She show up there, she not even teaching the kids nothing. They gaslighting the kids on the fact that Voldemort is back. Harry tried to tell these motherfuckers like, yo, this dude Voldemort is here. Like, we should probably, you know, protect ourselves. But what was I gonna say? But you know what? The funny thing about like the first film, when the first time that um, Harry and them is in the potions class with Snape, right? And Snape is explaining, his class and Harry's taking notes, right? And Snape kind of get like, goes in on him for like not paying attention because he wasn't looking at him. But Harry was taking notes about everything that he was saying. So it's like, but somehow he was getting like reprimanded because Snape misinterpreted what he was doing. I feel like that's like the synopsis of my life. It's like you be taking notes trying to do the right shit and somehow some way you get reprimanded because it's assumed that you're not paying attention, but it's like, "Nah, bro, I'm taking notes. I'm like taking notes of what you're talking about so I could learn and do better and do more." And you know what's interesting because I had um just watched Order of Phoenix, right? And so the cool thing about Order of Phoenix, because that teacher wasn't really doing what she was supposed to be doing, um, you know, damn, I'm really trying to figure out like who the fuck was the dark arts teacher in the first film. I know who it is. I know. I'm like, because mind you, I've been watching these movies back to back to back, and they're like 2 hour movies each. So I'm just like trying to get all the details together. But the first film, that's when he learns Quidditch and all of that with that lady. That lady was teaching for that. Damn, who the fuck was the dark arts teacher in the first film? The oh yeah, the dude with the Voldemort in the back of his head. Okay. I was like, oh my gosh, why am I drawing a blank on this? Him, that guy, Quarrel, Quill, that dude. He was the dark arts teacher, which was funny because he was real like scary type, like But then again, the whole stuttering was an act, so that was a part of his whole like facade of appearing like scary, even though like how did you get hired to do defense against the dark arts, even if that was your act? Like, you know what I mean? Okay. So you had him year one, you got Lockhart year two, Lupin year three. They actually had a good teacher that year, quality. The only thing was the fact that he was a werewolf. So he dipped. And then the fourth one was that lady. Um During the sixth one, Half Blood Prince. It was I think wasn't it Snape that year? Because they got the other teacher to come back to do potions. And usually Snape would do potions, but I think he did Defense Against the Dark Arts that year. And but like Snape is just ill with the potions. Like like the fact that he did have Blood Prince and the fact that he like was tweaking the errors of the textbooks to really correctly do the spells, like lets you know, like, yeah, he really put in that work when it comes to the potions. But anyway, and what I wanted to say with Order of Phoenix, which was dope, was when because the ministry lady with the all pink, she was lacking as a teacher. She wasn't really teaching them kids nothing. So they was like, look, we got to prepare ourselves when shit hit the fan because Voldemort is back, and we need to be able to like know what the fuck we can do to be on defense and then also be able to fight back. Like we might not be able to fight directly, like like on some like Voldemort level, but we'll at least know a little something. Like he not just about to come up here and wreak havoc, you know what I mean? Like he gonna have some resistance, some pushback before he come up here and try to get at Harry. Like, so he was setting them up for success basically. And we see Professor Harry breaking down the spells and you know, really teaching the kids like, yo, this how you do this spell, this how you don't do that spell, this and that. And it was dope to see because when they first was talking about it or even suggesting to have like hidden classes or secret classes or whatever the case may be, they was like, you know what? Harry should do it. And Harry's like, look, I mean, yeah, it sound like because when they was running through his resume, because mind you, Harry been through some bullshit at that all up until that point, right? First movie, you face off with the professor. You went through the whole thing with Hermione and Ron. with the three-headed dog and the keys that was flying and all of that, and he, was on the broom, flying through, getting the right key, and then fighting off the professor dude. Second movie, he fighting off Tom Riddle, the memory of Tom Riddle, and then the big snake that was going through wrecking havoc, petrifying the kids and all of that. And then third film, he dealt with, the Whomping Willow tree, dealing with Peter Pettigrew, Sirius Black, the the Dementors and all of that. He learned the Patronus. Like, his resume was pretty stacked by the time we got to the fifth film, is what I'm saying. And then, with the fourth one, which was crazy to me, I don't understand how that even happened. With him being in the whole, like, the wizard, what do you call it? The wizard, fucking Olympics, basically. The Olympics for wizards. When he was in that, what was interesting to me was that they even let that happen. I'm like, fuck the rules. They said you gotta be at least 17 to be a part of the to even be a champion for the tournament. He was 14. He wasn't even 16. It's not even like he had a year or like a few months to be 17 in the midst of it. Like, no, he was 14. How the fuck did y'all let that still happen? Granted, if they didn't, it wouldn't be no movie. But and and it was a lot going on. He had to face the dragons and swim in the water and all of that stuff and save the people. So it was a lot going on. And all the way up until him actually facing Voldemort and seeing Voldemort come back and then witnessing Cedric die. Like, and mind you, from Goblet of Fire and up, motherfuckers was just dropping left and right. Like, there was like a major character death in each movie since then, right? And I'm just like, oh my God, the emotions. Like, from him watching Cedric die and seeing Voldemort come back, Order of Phoenix, just when he was like really building a relationship with Sirius Black, he dies in that one. Then Dumbledore dies in the Half Blood Prince. It's like, oh my God, they just offer these motherfuckers left and right. And mind you, they're like key players, like key people in like the Order of Phoenix, like key folks that's leading the charge against Voldemort. And they squad was just really catching blows. And Voldemort is just like building his team. Like, they just recruiting motherfuckers left and right. And it wasn't looking too good for the Harry side of the battle. It just wasn't. I mean, they still had a solid team, but even then, even Snape had to play both sides. Like, Snape was playing the double agent, and it was kind of wild. And it was like, which side is Snape on? Like, and it was already established that Snape was being a spy for Dumbledore's side. But the fact that he had to make the unbreakable vow to what's her name? Draco's mom, Narcissus or Narcissus, her, but AKA Aunt Polly from Peaky Blinders. Which, mind you, is crazy because I didn't realize that that was her until like maybe like the last time I had like watched all the Harry Potter movies. But had to make the promise to her to protect Draco. And Draco is just such a crazy name. Like, I mean, from like saying that as a black woman, like, knowing how like rappers use the word Draco and say like in his name being Draco, Draco Malfoy, like that shit kind of go hard when it comes to like names. But anyway, and so like Snape got to play a double agent. Like, they team was just not as solid as it needed to be. And, just like from Goblet of Fire on, like you just got to prepare to be disappointed. Cause I'm like, oh my God, they really offing these motherfuckers. Like this shit is really crazy. But I mean, if this was legit, it makes sense. It makes sense because like it's but so many victories that they could have. Like Voldemort is really like about that life. You know what I'm saying? He not just no regular like, oh, I'm just a villain, you know, wizard. That nigga was really offing people. That nigga was crazy. But the thing about Voldemort, which I still feel like I don't understand is like what was the motive? You know what I mean? Like it's not like he had I don't know. I mean, I'm still watching it and I'm sure that like it might be explained in the books. All we know is like this dude was just like power hungry. He was just on the power and on a like a killing spree. But like what was the real motive? You know what I mean? Like it's not like if you think to like the Batman series, specifically the ones directed by Christopher Nolan with Christian Bale as Batman, and you think to the Joker, even though you don't see much of or hear much of the Joker's origin story, he explains like, his upbringing and like the father that he had and just like his perspective about society and how everybody that says they stand for justice is a bunch of hypocrites. And he just like lives outside of the rules of like the status quo and social norms and creates and wreaks havoc. But he was basically calling out what was corrupt about the people who supposedly is supposed to be like the moral compass or the moral standard of society. That made sense to me. Like I'm like, okay, I can understand like the motives of the Joker in that film and in that series. Like, like it's not like he was just like a villain for no reason. I feel like Voldemort low key a villain for no reason. Aside from the fact that he got beef with a teenager, you know, okay, but and he's power hungry and had been trying to get back into power. And then, like, we hear a little bit about his origin story and how he struggled as a kid. Well, even that, like, what was really going on for him to be so devious? I'm curious. But anyway, that's beside the point. But I kind of went on a tangent there. But all of those experiences and the fact that Harry like survived all of it and witnessed all these situations, he was the perfect teacher for the kids, you know, especially when they were in a situation where the people who were supposed to be teaching them wasn't and was basically failing them. And he's like, look, Voldemort really here. And what was interesting was as like, when they were in like the pub or whatever, and they were discussing like even having those like secret classes or whatever, Hermione and Ron was hyping them up. It was like, yeah, I mean, he did this and he did this and he survived that. Harry, like, look, when you say it like that, it sounds dope. But to actually go through those things, like, it's not just like, the stuff that they be talking about in these books and these textbooks. Like, when you really go through these life or death situations and you're facing death in the face and you have to defend yourself or you witness some crazy stuff, a lot of it be happening in a moment. He was like, yo, some of this shit be luck and it really just be like it's just how the cookie crumble. And not only that, but I feel like it's a matter of like fight or flight. And he's like, a lot of times I really don't need to be knowing what I'm doing and it just works out. But it's better to prepare yourself. But then at the same time, like I get where he was coming from because I think that scene was really dope because like that's some real shit. Because sometimes in life, when you accomplish and you do some things, to you it might not seem like a lot until somebody else explains it and tells you like, yo, you've been doing this, you're really good at that, you've been working hard at this. And if from your perspective it's just you happen to be in those situations or you just happen to like do a thing And sometimes you might not even know how you do a thing. I know I have moments like that sometimes too. In a funny example of that, not in my own life, but to like iterate that point, was when Erica Badu and Azalea Banks was having like a beef kind of moment years ago. And because I think Erica Badu basically said like she wasn't really feeling Azalea Banks' music, and then Azalea felt the way and kind of like clapped back. And then Erica Badu was like, "Look, the incense." I think that's when she said that whole like the incense and alkaline water could turn to like cigarettes in a Colt 50 or something. I don't know. I know she said that. I don't know if she said that in reference to that. But basically, she was like, "Look, if you want the smoke, we can get there." And so people was hyped up because she had made this post on Twitter where she dropped her address or like dropped her location. And, people say that like, oh, if you wanna catch the smoke, like drop the Addy and and run up. And so people was like, yo, when you dropped the address, that shit was crazy. Erica was like, honestly, I didn't even know I did that. I didn't even know that that's what happened, but I just went with it. Like, yeah, you seen what I did there. Yeah, I dropped the Addy, run up. But she wasn't really actually trying to drop the address. Like, it just for whatever reason, I guess it was like a butt dial type situation on Twitter, and that just happened, and it just made it look like, "Hey, yo, that was dope." And I feel like that's what Harry was trying to get at. And I know I've had moments like that where I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, I dropped the Addy. What's up?" But there are some moments where like things do be deliberate, and it's like, "Yeah, I know what the fuck I'm doing. Like, don't fuck with me." And I feel like Harry be having those moments too, but like in the midst of it, I think the thing with Harry is like he's more courageous and brave than he is strategic. So in those situations, it's not like, okay, I'm gonna plan this out to a T. I'm gonna do this like this. I'm gonna make this move like this, and I'm gonna play this like this. I mean, he's become that over the years, but a lot of times it be courage. A lot of times it just be the mere fact that in those heat of the moment situations, he doesn't back down and he rises to the occasion, and he it's like the fight or flight. He shows up for the fight. Even if it's not in his favor, even if it's not in his favor and the odds and there's like a high chance that he might lose the fight, he still has the courage to show up for the fight. And I've realized that in my own life in certain situations. I'm like, look, I might not be the most knowledgeable or strategic person in this situation, but it's more so the fact that I have heart and I'm brave enough to be like, fuck what y'all talking about. If I gotta stand up against all you motherfuckers, I'm gonna do that. And I feel like that's what Harry be doing. But the thing is, in that scene when they were in the pub and just like hyping him up about all the stuff that he knew how to do, he was really, yeah, it was the courage and yeah, it was the bravery, which is like not a skill, which is like a blessing in itself to be courageous. Because you could be as strategic and well thought out and knowledgeable as you want, but if you don't got no courage to stand up for something, none of that matters. But Harry really had a lot of courage. And in those situations, like in Goblet of Fire, when when they got when him and Cedric got the port key, and they were supposed to go to the next challenge, but they ended up going to like the graveyard with Voldemort and ended up being a part of that ritual that brought Voldemort back. Even in the midst of that, it was a bunch of Death Eaters there. It was Voldemort. You got Peter Pettigrew. You just watched Voldemort kill Cedric, you know, and Harry is just like, all right, it's just Harry. Mind you, he there by himself. The one other person that would have been there that would have been a good fighter with him literally just died like 2 seconds on the scene, like crazy. And so he's in this situation like, all right, how do I get out of this? How do I find my way? How do I fight out of this? It didn't look like the odds were in his favor at all in that scene. And, you know, and I mean, even Voldemort was clearly like more skilled and stronger than him. Even in the fact that Voldemort had literally just came back, like after, like, they used Harry's blood or whatever the case may be. But the fact that, Harry got his wand and he was hiding behind the thing and he was like, all right, shit. He came up out of there and was like, all right, if you want to battle, let's battle. He was ready to go 10 toes down against Voldemort, the person that everybody is scared to even say this man's name. And he never was scared to say his name. And of all people that should have been scared of Voldemort, it should have been Harry, because this is the guy that killed his parents. But he said, and he actually, as a baby, came across that man, and his whole life was changed over that man. If there was anybody that should have been fearful of Voldemort, it should have been Harry. But Harry was the only one that's like, Voldemort, yeah, I'm gonna say your full name, and I ain't scared. Like, everybody else be like, oh, we shouldn't say his name. Harry be like, bitch, I'm gonna say his name. The fuck? And do. And not only that, not only was he courageous enough to say his name when everybody else was too scared to even speak his name, but he in this situation in a graveyard by himself, no allies, no support, and you got the person that everybody fears and Death Eaters all there. And mind you, this kid is 14. 14 years old. And he like, all right, fuck it. Let's go. Get your wand out. And that in itself, it doesn't matter how many spells you know, or how skilled you are, or how big and bad, or whatever the case may be. It's the fact that in the most terrifying situations and circumstance, he was willing to be like, all right, bitch, I'm going to get my wand out. I don't know how this going to go, but I'm going to fight back. And whereas Voldemort was doing the Avada Kedavra spell, trying to kill Harry, literally trying to off Harry too. Harry did his counter spell. I forget which spell it was. But in the spell that he did, the spirits of his mom and his dad showed up. And even Cedric's spirit showed up too and was like, look, we got you. We gonna protect you, this and that. And just how he even got out of that situation was so clever too, because and then Cedric was like, look, make sure you bring my body back to my dad or whatever. And so in doing that, he goes to Cedric, got the port key, and then got up out of there, right? But even to think quickly on his feet like that, and even in a situation where he, like, it seemed like he was alone and he had nobody, he still had the support of, like, the spirit of his parents and technically his ancestors, right? If you want to get to the spiritual bag of it all, the ancestors showed up and was like, yeah, nah, not this one. He the chosen one. But the fact that, like, even Harry stood up and was like, yeah, he's outnumbered. He's outnumbered to a group of people that clearly want to kill him, you know, and stood 10 toes down and fought that man anyway, knowing that that man knows more spells, knowing that he's more ruthless and willing to do those forbidden spells and those forbidden curses that Harry knows how to do, but doesn't do, The only time we really saw him do that, well, compared to where I am right now, in comparison to, just in the process of watching the movies, because I'm still like, I still have a few more to watch. But in watching Order of Phoenix, he did the Crucio spell, which is basically like the spell to like torture somebody or whatever. He did that to what's her name? Beatrix, and she the one who at that point had just killed Sirius Black. So he was like, "Look, bitch, I before I might not have done this spell, but you gonna get the smoke from me, okay? I'm here for that." But you know, it takes courage. It takes bravery to say, like, even in situations where it doesn't look like the odds are in your favor, but I'm just gonna stand 10 toes down anyway and use the resources that I do know, the spells that I do know, the protections, and just like, you know, rise to the occasion. That's the thing that makes Harry dope, because like you got somebody like Hermione who's smart, clearly smart. And she knows a lot of spells because she's well read and she does the research, and she knows the histories of different creatures and all these things. Like she's more knowledgeable. But the thing with Harry is like in a lot of those situations where it's easy for people to just run away, he's like, nah, I'm gonna stand and fight. And then I'm gonna do what I need to do to get up out of here. But you gonna at least get the smoke from me. You know what I mean? And he doesn't cower ever. Like, and even in situations where like he appears to be like scared and fearful, he still rises up to the occasion, stands 10 toes down, and fights against like the craziest opponents. And because of that, I feel like it makes him the best teacher. And again, it's more than just being like it. I mean, it's the two. It's the two things of like knowing all the spells, but then also having the courage to like know, like, yeah, these situations are gonna happen. These battles are gonna come up. And it's better for you to know how to fight and know these spells, know how to protect yourself. God willing, God forbid that these things happen, rather than be in a situation where you don't know and you're scared and you just run off, you know? So, I got a lot from these films. Um, and that was like one of the bigger takeaways that I got, especially because I don't think people talk, well, I don't know. Um, then again, like I feel like Harry Potter has been like done for a long time. But then again, like it's so good, like it's still always relevant. And it's not like I be talking to people about Harry Potter. But I always enjoyed the films, and in rewatching it, it's just kind of like breathe new life um into that world for me. Um and it's definitely something that ages well and gets better over time. Um in terms of like a series and a story and all these things. And for me, what was really dope was seeing like Harry, like as modest as he is, as modest as like he didn't wanna toot his own horn, and I completely understood where he was coming from, where he was like, "Sometimes these situations just happen, and I don't really be knowing what I'm doing, and then luck be playing out." But then at the same time, like, he did go to Lupin to learn how to do the Patronus, and that's an advanced skill for his age at the time when he learned it. So the fact that he even knew how to do the Patronus and to be able to teach other people how to do it too, and know how to teach people and say, look, you have to be in this state of like, you got to think about a happy memory and this and that, and you have to stay focused for it to be strong. And there's different types of Patronuses. There's Patronus where it's like, little flutters, but then there's like a full, you know, the full animal Patronus, like, just knowing the different nuances of the spells. And And that could be like translated to real life too. Like there's definitely things where it's like the more focused in on something and the more knowledgeable, the stronger it could be. And like even in actual magic and actual conjure, like, and there's nuances to that too. Like there's times and situations where spells work and where spells don't work, or it takes time to work, or like, there's certain ways to, you know, all of that, all of that be real. It's essentially what I'm saying. And I just thought that that was interesting. Um, seeing Harry as a teacher. And you know what? The thing about Draco that intrigues me. Well, first of all, like we seen Draco day one, and he's supposed to be like the main antagonist, right? And he kind of like slid to the background in Goblet of Fire because there was a lot going on in that film. So we didn't really see a lot on Draco, but it's not until like the Half Blood Prince where we really see him, and he's trying to prove himself to the Dark Lord and all those things. I feel like his character development was really interesting. I mean, I have more thoughts, but I have to watch the rest of the films to like really give my perspective on it. But yeah, those are some of the interesting things that I noticed in terms of like the films, and then also something else that I wanted to say, um, because I was like, because y'all know I'll be getting into my like think pieces out loud or whatever. If my life were like the Truman Show, you already know. But I was like, man, fuck my think sharing my think pieces for the Truman Show. I'll share it for my platform. And if you're watching on the Truman Show, you can just go to YouTube, hit the search bar, type in NARISSE, hit the subscribe button, and watch on my platform. Thank you in advance. Anyway, um, so what was interesting along with this, not necessarily like about like character development or anything, but just like the evolution of technology and how things were filmed at the time. What was really cool was um the evolution of Sirius Black communicating to Harry through the fireplace, and how like in one film, which was it was Goblet of Fire because this was after Prisoner of Azkaban. So in Goblet of Fire, he was like in the fire, like his face was in the fire, and then the technology switched where like he was like a flame in the fire, and you could see like his face in the flame. And it was cool to see like the advancement of like the technology and how they ended up doing that. Um and and just like and even with like the Quidditch scenes too, and just like how they do the scenes of them flying is pretty fucking dope. And the first movie, you can tell like certain stuff is like the CGI with like the troll and stuff like that. It's still like really good for what it was at the time. And I know like there's been a lot of advancements from then to now. Like it's been like almost like the fact that it's only almost been like 25 years is crazy, you know? I mean, technically it's like 23 years, but like I'm just rounding up at this point. But the fact that that was nearly 25 years ago and the films still look as good as it does, like it's not like, I know like when I think to like my father's generation, he was really big into like Star Trek and Star Wars. And for me, my generation of Star Trek is like the Chris Pine movies where that came out in like the 2000s, like 2009, I think was the first one that came out. The graphics in that is really good. And I know Star Trek back in the day is the classic with William Shatner and I forget the guy who plays um um Leon Leonard Lenore. Oh, sorry if I mess up his name, but the guy who plays Spock, like classic old school Spock, right? I know to a generation that was like monumental at the time, but because I've been so spoiled with like quality technology and special effects and like CGI and stuff like that, it's hard for me to like go back to the like old school films and shows and stuff and watch action or like science fiction with the quality looking like it was back in the day, like the old school Superman movies. And what else? Like the old school like superhero, even like the like old school Star Wars. I could never get into those films just because it's along with the storyline, it has to be visual for me. And because like I can clearly see that the special effects wasn't what it needed to be back then, I can't really get into it. And I know like it's classic films and shows and stuff like that. But like I grew up in an era where the special effects were like advanced and dope. So, and I say that to say like growing up with Harry Potter coming out in real time, all those films were like the quality, like the special effects were really good, and even with the stuff that you can kind of tell is like a little bit fake, like even how they did Voldemort on the back of like the professor's head or whatever the case may be, like that's still like how they did that looks really good to this day, you know? And I'm sure they can like if it were done today, it would be a lot more different and look more realistic. But like I said, like it still looks good for what it was 25 years ago, versus if it were to have come out like 50 years ago, which I mean is obvious because technology advances. But it's dope to see like Harry Potter is one of those films where it needed technology to be where it is for the movies to be good for me at least. Like, and I'm glad that I grew up in the era where like action and like science fiction and fantasy, like the equipment and the technology available can make those movies and films look realistic. And yeah, that's pretty fucking dope. And that was another point that I wanted to say. I think that was pretty much all the things that I wanted to get at. Um, especially like the main thing that I wanted to talk about was like the first two films. Um, and then there was other like points and perspectives and opinions that I had. Um, and yeah, when I continue watching it, I'll double back and say what I want to say. But again, if you haven't watched it, I suggest like rewatching it. You know, you could put your millions glasses on and watch the magical posters moving from frame to frame in the film, and even just how they did that sequence, like I said before, like was just like really good for the technology that was available at the time. But like those scenes with the like that opening scene with Dumbledore meeting with Hagrid, dropping off Harry with the lightning bolt on his head in 2001, mind you. And and then all the way up to that scene like at the very end with Dumbledore talking to Harry and just kind of like telling him everything that was going on. And then you know what, even another point, um with Chamber of Secrets with Jenny and how Tom Riddle through the book was controlling Jenny into like, putting up like the sign like the messages with the blood and all of that stuff, and like manipulating her into doing it. Just like that in itself was like kind of crazy that, just like the storyline was wild. And and just again another situation where Harry's out here saving these hoes. Not that she a hoe, but I'm just saying that jokingly. But, you know, just like how they did that scene, and then like what Tom Riddle as a name kind of goes hard. But then when he like spelled out his whole name and then rearranged it to like I'm Lord Voldemort, and his whole thing was like I wasn't trying to keep my muggles um that last name or whatever. And he created his own name for himself, which I can understand. Um which is interesting. And like I mean Voldemort as a name is kind of crazy. Kind of like Alistair Moody. Um, you know, it's like Alistair Moody, Alistair Crawley, you know, correlations there. I don't know, it's crazy. Magical reference. If y'all don't know who Alistair Crawley is, I mean, he's known he is a wizard that was really popular, I think like in the 60s, like 60s, 70s or something like that, maybe even before then. And he's known for being like into like the dark arts, really, and embracing like the mark of the beast, and having being like this free radical like wizard, and like being really into like sex magic and stuff like that. Like if you don't believe me, look it up. Alistair Crawley. You can look it up yourself. I feel like that the character Alistair Moody was based off that. And even though technically in Goblet of Fire, it was the fake Alistair Moody. Because it was actually what was that guy's name? The guy that was in the ministry who um whose son ended up being a part of the Dark Eaters. Or Dark Eaters, the Death Eaters. He was using the potion to be Alistair Moody, but Alistair Moody nonetheless. But yeah, anyway, Chamber of Secrets. Yeah, there was a lot going on in Chamber of Secrets. You know, there was it was a lot to that storyline. And mind you, these were two movies. The first two was directed by Chris Columbus, which is a crazy name. Um and the screenplay, I think all the screenplays were done by Steve Clove. I think that's how you say his name. But what's interesting is that the third movie was it was a different director, I forget his name, but Chris Columbus still produced on that film. So he was still a part of the third film, but he didn't direct it like he directed the first two. And the first two really like had me like, wow, look at this. It's very interesting. Um and then of course up until like I don't think he was involved with the fourth one. I could be wrong. I gotta look through the credits again. But I know the fourth one was like the tournament with the Goblet of Fire. It's a tournament, and you need to at least be like 17 to get into the tournament. And Harry was only 14, and it clearly, like, there was some type of like bewitching to have him even be a part of the tournament in the first place. And my thing was like, like as dope as Hogwarts is, like the magic and the conjure and all that stuff, like these professors was really failing these kids. And I understand why they had like the magic ministry people like be a part of Hogwarts and like monitor what was going on in the fifth film. But at the same time, them people wasn't no better either because they weren't teaching the kids what they needed to learn to defend themselves. But the fact that they even went forward with allowing Harry to be a part of the tournament is crazy to me because they're like, oh, it's strict rules and this and that. I'm like, if it's strict rules, y'all can argue the fact that Harry wasn't even 17 and was put into the tournament. You know what I mean? So it's like he was literally 14. Wasn't even like close to 17 at all or anything like that. So yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. But again, if they'd have took Harry out the tournament, wouldn't be no movie. You know, there wouldn't be a Goblet of Fire and the whole storyline of him fighting the dragons and going under the water to save um save Ron and the other girl or whatever the case may be. Like those stories wouldn't have happened had the professors actually do what they probably should have done. But yeah, I don't know. There's just a thought. um but yeah, I mean, it's just crazy how there was like all these like events that would take place every year. And I'm just like, and somehow, some way, like people would just keep sending their kids back to Hogwarts. Like, you know? And I'm like, there wasn't no other magical schools or anything like that. I don't know. It's kind of crazy. But then again, at the same time, like them kids would put themselves in them situations. You know what I mean? Like at the same time, like, because I mean, Harry couldn't help being who he was. Like, Harry couldn't help being the person that lived when Voldemort tried to, you know, put the paws on him or put the spells on him or whatever, right? However, at the same time, like the other kids around him, like Ron and Hermione and all of them, like they were very much like, as much as they would try to like scold him and say like, "Oh my gosh, Harry, you're so stubborn. Why are you like you shouldn't do this?" But they was right there with him. They was right there in the shenanigans with him, you know what I mean? But on a real note, even though I know it's like a fiction, they I will say like Hermione and Ron were like some solid friends. And it's surprising that it wasn't all the way up until like the fourth film where you see them have like a rift between each other as a group with like Ron just kind of tired of being like the second guy and Harry getting all the shine. But it's like, yeah, Harry's getting all the shine, but like he gotta fight fucking dragons and shit and do all these adventures and tasks that he didn't even sign up for. He didn't want to do that. You know what I mean? Like he didn't ask for that life. It's a life that was put on him because the whole situation that happened with his parents and them being who they are. Like he didn't ask for that shit, you know? And it just so happens that he's constantly in these situations where, he has to rise to the occasion. But and it can seem like on the outside looking in, like, oh, you're getting all the glory and the this and the that. But like he began his ass whooped every like in every movie, like fighting all these scenarios. And it's like, yeah, like the journey of a hero, it's not like it seems glamorous, but when you're going through those situations and like the obstacles and stuff like that shit is not glamorous. Like everybody want to be a hero until like they got to think about what actually goes into what a hero deals with and what they go through and the obstacles and the beasts that they have to face. Like all that shit looks nice on the surface until you really got to go through all of that. And, and you see for the first time, like, Ron actually getting, like, a little bit jealous of Harry, and but, they work through it, though. And even you see the same thing with Hermione. Okay, another perspective. I was gonna shorten this video, but, like, the points just be pointing. Um, you know, I know that technically Ron is supposed to be, like, the love interest of Hermione, but I always thought, like, I felt like it was done in a way to, like, make Ron not seem excluded, because it would be cliche if it was Hermione and Harry. However, it makes more sense. It just would have made more sense for Harry and Hermione to be together. Like, as cliche as that would have been, it just made more sense based on the movies. And I feel like even based on the books too. Granted, I haven't read the books in a long time, but I felt like this was the perspective that I always felt. But in rewatching the movies again, I was like, she might as well have been with Harry. Because the thing is, as much as she had feelings for Ron, she would be more affectionate and more like physical, but not in like in a weird way, but like she would always be quick to like hug Harry, like anytime like after like the holidays and stuff like that, and they would re-link up, you know, they would always be like loving and embracing one another more than she would have been with Ron, you know? With Ron, it was always this kind of like, I mean, yeah, there was like a chemistry thing, like, oh, I kind of like you, you kind of like me type of thing. But nah, like it made more sense for her to be with Harry. Like, I mean, if you watch all the movies and really peep how she interacts with Harry, like, it's like that situation where a girl likes a guy, but she has a guy friend and she goes to the guy friend with like all the drama and the tea and all that stuff. That was kind of like Harry. Harry was like that guy friend. But like then again, at the same time, like I've been in my own situation like that where like I had a friend at a time where like they were kind of like that. Like we were really close, but it just never worked out in a romantic way. But it just like people were even like suggesting like, oh my gosh, you guys would be so cute together. And like we even like talked about it or whatever, but it just never like transpired. So I mean, I guess I can understand it from my own experience. I can understand it. But even still, like it just as not from my own experience, but just as a spectator of somebody that's like really a fan of the series and just watching what all was going down, I just feel like Hermione should have just been with Harry. You know? Like and like okay, and if Harry wasn't gonna be with her, him with Jenny, like no shade to Jenny. I don't know. Like I just wasn't really feeling that pairing. And even the Cho girl in Goblet of Fire, because she was with Cedric for a second, but he kind of liked her, like the Asian girl. And I mean, like I was kind of okay. You know what? Actually, I wouldn't have mind if there was like a romantic connection between him and Luna. That would have made sense to me, because they kind of had like this interesting connection where a lot of the things that would happen, like I was saying before, how there would be stuff going on and Harry would like hear voices and the fact that he can even speak parcel tongue and speak to snakes and stuff like that. And there would be like he would be having visions and all of these weird dreams. And even the people who are more knowledgeable of the magical stuff going on, he would experience stuff that people wouldn't be able to like relate to. Like even seeing like I forget what creature it was, but the creature that's like invisible to everybody else, but that would be pulling the carriages whenever they would go back to school and bring all their like luggage and stuff like that. The creatures that's like invisible to everybody else, but the fact that Luna would be able to see those things that he would be able to see, And anytime where he would hear certain stuff and nobody else was hearing what he was hearing, she would hear those things. And I always I liked their friendship and I liked their connection. And, you know, like, that would have made more sense to me. Like, I can see, like, if he wasn't gonna be with Hermione, just out of the fact of it being like a cliche friendship, it would have made more sense if he him and Luna, if there was like a thing between them. Like I could actually see that. Jenny, I was just like, no shade to Jenny, but I feel like we didn't really like we don't like what we ain't really see Jenny like that. You know what I mean? Like I just felt like J.K. Rowling was just throwing these characters together at this point. Like I wasn't really a fan of the relationships because we don't really know much about Jenny aside from the fact that that's Ron's little sister. Like we don't know what she into. We don't know if she's smart like that. We don't really know. We didn't really know her, respectfully. I mean, granted, I'm sure there's some description of her like more detailed in the book, but I feel like in terms of like chemistry, it would have made more sense for Harry to be with Luna, just because like even with as close as he was to Hermione, he had a connection with Luna with certain things that other people just didn't get and didn't understand, and she got it. And I feel like they would have been cute, like on a chemistry level, like like the vibes, like it just would have made more sense. But yeah, that was another um point that I wanted to mention. Um, I think that was all my points for now. Until I have more. But yeah, that's my Harry Potter think piece. Um, and yeah, definitely check out those movies. If not like for the holidays. I mean, if you don't want to get into like the whole dark side of it all, I mean, it ends up working out in the end anyway. But you could definitely watch the first two. The first two films. Those it's fun, it's upbeat, it's family friendly, um, but at the same time, like adventurous and all those things. Um, and yeah, it's just a good, good series. Like, and it aged well. Again, aside from the whole like lack of representation thing, that's my only complaint. I'm sure there's other things I can complain about, but for the most part, like I do thoroughly enjoy that franchise. But and at the same time, like if we want to like talk outside of the Truman Show code, I understand the lack of representation. Like I realized that the lack of or the representation that was there was intentional. I'll say that. I As much as I would have liked to see more of my people, I realized that why my people was there, and I'll just leave it at that. Um, but yeah, shout out to the Wizarding World. Shout out to Harry Potter. And you know, it's still like such a good series, like to this day. And again, like it's just so crazy. How a lot of the stuff that's in that film could be like considered like real today with like magic and conjure and all these things. But then also just like just the simplicity and the complex things of just like everyday feelings and emotions of you know being in school and going through puberty and having like fallouts with your friends and adventures, just all those things. And yeah, I think it's really dope. And yeah, I'm like almost done. my series. But and it's interesting seeing like the color grade shift and change through the films. I mean, specifically around like Order of Phoenix. It's really Order of Phoenix and Half Blood Prince, but more Order of Phoenix than anything. I feel like that's the one film where you really see like the blue of the book and the blue of like the posters and stuff really translated into the color grade of that film. Um, and yeah, that's all I'll get into with that. But anyway, yeah, so I hope you guys are having a really good holiday season. I hope you all are blessed, loved, and abundant. And I have other perspectives about completely different topics that I'll share eventually. Um, but I want to be intentional about what I say. This I was just kind of like freestyling and going off the cuff. I'm sure there might have been some Truman Show expectancies, but I don't give a fuck about that shit no more. I'm just gonna say the thing and just make the points that I feel to make. Um and yeah, sorry, I'm just looking at I was making sure I wasn't covering the mic. But yeah, like just good movies, good quality films, and again, like courage. So I don't know, not to make it an inspirational thing. This was just me talking. And discussing like my perspectives and opinions about the film and the series this time around. And I'm sure there's like nuanced things that I'll probably miss out on. But when I really like focus, I could like a lot of the stuff that I would have like overlooked before stand out to me more now. It makes more sense. And I'm like, oh, okay, I get that. Why they put that together. Like certain characters were like like characters that might not have been like super significant, but there's like a connection to them or whatever that I probably would have like disregarded it or forgot or whatever. I'm able to like follow their storyline a little bit more. Um and yeah, that's just it's interesting being older and like being able to like comprehend things a little bit better versus like when you're a kid. When you're a kid, you're like just excited by all like the oh my gosh, you're doing this spell and oh my gosh, they're like running away from the trolls and this and that. But the older that you get, you kind of like pay more attention to like what's really going on, especially like what's going on with the adults and just what they're working on and the lack thereof of what they could have been working on. Um, and you realize like, oh wait, there's more to this film than what meets the eye initially. Like, I feel like every time I watch it, I see something different, something that pushes the status quo, and it's still a spectacular film and series. But yeah, that's my thoughts and my opinions, and yeah. Anyway, I'm gonna conclude this live stream. And just yes, I intentionally don't be looking at y'all comments because I know sometimes it'd be a lot of trolls. I know sometimes there'd be people in there that say a positive word, and I appreciate that. And then again, I know there's people who pander, and I'm like, even if you're pandering, if it's a positive word and take it as a positive message, then I receive that as well, and I transmute it to working in my favor because everything works in my favor, and and that's how I craft my reality. But anyway, have a good night. It's like 4 a.m. where I am right now, but it's a Saturday, I think. Oh no, it's Sunday now, but it was Saturday yesterday, last night, technically. Well, I think it's technically still Saturday for me because I hadn't officially went to bed yet. So yeah. But anyway, um, yeah, all right, I'm done. I hope y'all enjoyed this live stream. Hope you have a good night. And I hope you enjoy rewatching Harry Potter. And if you're watching for the first time, well, I hope you enjoy that series and Sorry if I ruined any details for you. It's still good nonetheless. But, anyway, much love. I'll catch you